So Yves, you're the founder of Fundación Capital, so why don't you tell me a little bit about what Fundación Capital does?
Thank you, Larry. Fundación Capital is how can I describe it briefly? It's a social enterprise, international institution. We do work in 15 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean at present. We like to describe ourselves as a kind of incubator of innovations. Innovations in financial inclusion, innovations in information and communication technologies, information and in capabilities for development, programs, innovations in social protection, innovations in cash transfers, innovations in graduation programs. So we try to pilot test different kind of innovations permanently, and then when we are convinced about the interest of an innovation, we do advocate it with governments, with banks, with central banks, with different kind of partners, depending on innovation, of course. So that's what we do basically.
Okay.
We're advisors to stakeholders basically involved in financial inclusion / graduation / poverty reduction issues,
right.
And training and capabilities issues.
And so you've done a lot of work with conditional cash transfers with governments in Latin America. Can you describe how that works?
Yes, a part of the innovation side of what defines us, or again, trying to innovate, it's easier to say than to do it, but we deeply believe that, and we are only interested in scaling up solutions. The unbanked adults on Earth are 2.5 billion people. So when we think about financial inclusion, and we deeply believe financial inclusion is a right for poor people, we need to find massive solutions. We need to go to scale, absolutely and definitely. And it's easier to say than to do it, but we are not interested in working with, 10,000 beneficiaries, even with fantastic solutions, because financially include 10,000 beneficiaries will not solve the massive problem that we are facing when it comes to financial inclusion. So, as far as I remember, that was in 2006, something like that, 6 or 7 years ago. We had those extremely powerful tools to financially include extremely poor people, women, basically, through the opening of bank accounts in regulated institutions. And then we started thinking, how can we go to scale? And then we decided that it would be interesting to use conditional cash transfer programs as a kind of institutional vehicle articulating financial inclusion / savings mobilization schemes with conditional cash transfer programs, because those programs do exist. Their infrastructure is already paid by public money. They are massive by definition, reaching 25 million families in Latin America alone. That is 110 million people only in Latin America and the Caribbean. In principle, they are targeting the core poor, ultra poor / poor people, supposing the targeting is adequately done, but it's usually quite well done in most countries. And they are stable institutions and stable programs, social protection programs. These are fantastic advantages.
So you work with those programs, getting the cash transfers put into bank accounts or on debit cards?
Well, not exactly, or not only, because it goes like this. First, we need to convince governments, CCT managers and other stakeholders that their true interests is the same as the beneficiaries or clients' interests, the same as the bank's interests, the same as the government's interests, and that linking financial inclusion with CCT is good for everybody. Mm-hmm. It's of course good for the clients because when she can better manage her scarce resources using bank accounts, a poor woman is going to be better off. Mm-hmm. For different reasons. It's a good opportunity for CCT programs because it lowers drastically their operating costs. It's of course cheaper to transfer directly public subsidies to an account of the beneficiary than to pay her cash in hand. Mm-hmm. So once this is done, and it's a huge advocacy work, once this is done, things get easier, and it's a long process, but we already succeeded in banking a big amount of beneficiaries. We expect to have 5 million families fully financially included in 2016, and probably 8 million in 2018. So this is basic.
Right,
yes.
Right. It's huge scale.
It works. You cannot teach face-to-face a lot of people. Right. I mean, 10,000, 20,000. We did that with 50,000 families in Colombia, and then it becomes a nightmare logistically, and in terms of costs, it's a nightmare. So we need to find other ways to do financial education, not face-to-face anymore. And we started thinking, how can we do that? So traditionally, what we've seen, we've seen radio programs and that kind of things, but we thought it wasn't impactful enough. I mean, it's interesting, marginally interesting, but not impactful enough. So we decided, as we always think that for the poor, the best, we decided to buy 40, 50, I don't remember, iPads, develop an interactive digital financial education system with iPads, with tablets, leave tablet computers in communities, just like this. There's no training before, nothing. And come back a month later and see what happens. And a month later, all those women knew perfectly well the content of this financial education program. Their kids knew the content of it. Everybody was able to manage the tablet. Their self-esteem was in the sky, because they got access to a fantastic technology. Right. And we didn't lose one tablet. Really? We left those tablets are expensive. Right. I mean, we left those tablets just like that in the countryside. None disappeared. We did a lot of studies and testing and impact studies and randomized control trials just to prove that this is working and that this is cheap. It's a cheap technology. We now work with $150 tablet computers, and it's much cheaper than any face-to-face financial education system, because with one tablet it circulates among 200, 300 families. So. Right. A new innovation. It's called LIFT. Okay. Leveraging financial inclusion with technology. Okay. Great. And we are now using this new tool in Brazil, in Guatemala, in El Salvador, in Colombia, in Dominican Republic, in Ecuador. So we will soon have results on a larger scale, probably with almost 1 million beneficiaries.
So for a microfinance-focused institution, so one that's providing credit and hopefully savings as well, is there a role for them to play in this picture? Definitely.
Well, almost definitely. as we believe that all financial services are necessary. Savings, credits, transfers, insurance, etc. There is room for everybody, but we also believe that savings is the best instrument to initiate
The starting point.
a starting point.
Right.
Through which you can get progressively access to other financial services. Right. And savings is for everybody. Mm-hmm. Credit is not for everybody. Credit is for...
Well, and you know...
Credit is exclusive by definition, as it should be.
Well, and more on a time basis, we save all the time, we borrow periodically when we need it.
Everybody's saving, or should be saving.
Right.
And few receive credit, and that's exactly what's financial intermediation is. Mm-hmm. And it should be like this. Credit is for taking deposits, mobilizing deposits from all your customers,
right, from lots of people,
and lending to few. Mm-hmm. So of course I'm not saying credit is useless. Credit is a fantastic instrument, and it's an extremely, unbelievably powerful instrument, but it's not for everybody, and it's not necessarily for the core poor, extreme poor. It's not necessarily the best instrument as a first step to financial inclusion. So unfortunately, many MFIs by law cannot take deposits. So so I believe that if I was general manager or in the board of those MFIs, I would strongly suggest to formalize and regulate and be able to take deposits, because that's the way to go. I mean, you have to take and manage the savings of your customers. Mm-hmm. That's key. If you don't do it, you just live on one leg. I mean, it's not appropriate. And
but if they do have savings, then
that's another story. Then we need them. We desperately need them. But what we need to do, and that's what we are doing in Latin America, we need to create a business case for those banks, small business banks, even MFIs, for them to be convinced that there is a business, an adequate business in managing deposits of a lot of poor people with small deposit balance. Even MFIs that are not necessarily convinced that this is a good business. And here probably we can observe something. In many cases it's cheaper when you are an MFI to refinance your credit needs with external credit lines, subsidized credit lines, in many cases from donors, international aid agencies, governments, kivas. So it's a kind of competition against trying to mobilize local savings. If I'm a general manager of an MFI, I can take deposits, but it costs me, I don't know, 5% operating and financial costs. And I can receive a 0% credit line from external institutions. What should I do? I believe I should mobilize savings of my customers. But I mean, it's complicated. You understand that?
Yeah. But you mobilize savings because it is a necessary service for the clients you're trying to serve.
But it's a kind of sacrifice, because you could be able to refinance your credit needs at a much cheaper rate. In that sense, I believe that many donor and institutions and international aid agencies should think twice before offering cheap credit to MFIs.
Now, one other thing is about this, you're working with people, the poorest that the government recognizes, that are receiving these cash subsidies. Seems like there would be that would marry very well with graduation programs. So is there work you are doing to combine the work of graduation programs with some of the people who receive these
This is a complementary initiative. We do manage a quite important, an important graduation program in different countries in Latin America. Graduation programs work fantastically well. The way we try to design us, and drawing from the fantastic BRAC experience in Bangladesh, Professor Hashemi, it works well with the poorest of the poor, with the invisible one. By definition, beneficiaries of conditional cash transfers are visible.
Right, right.
Recognized and identified and targeted by the governments. But you've got a lot of extremely poor who are not visible because they don't even have an ID, an identity card. They don't exist as citizens. They are out of the radar. And these are the people we need to find, to target, to identify, and to accompany with graduation programs. That's specific intervention. It's complementary to CCT, savings-linked CCTs, I would say, and as useful. As useful. What we are doing is trying to, we adapted, adjusted, hopefully improved the BRAC technology, adapting it for Latin America reality, but we added something new, that is, from the very beginning, from scratch, we designed those interventions hand in hand with governments, national governments, because again, we want to go to scale, and the only way to go to scale with extreme poor, with graduation technologies, it's not the market, of course.
Right.
So the only solutions is improving inclusive public policies. So you need to work with governments from the beginning. You cannot pilot test a graduation program in a country and then afterwards go and see the governments and tell the government, hey, this is working. No, it's easier from the beginning to do that with the government, for policymakers to be convinced and go to scale again.